All right, guys, we're back on here on the show to continue talking about the playoffs, the wild card games that we have coming up this weekend. I'm only going to go through the Saturday games before tomorrow I go into the Sunday games and a couple more topics. But the second one that we have coming up on Saturday is we get to see the third matchup between the Steelers and the Ravens this season. Like I mentioned before, they've already split the regular season series that they have, only two games, one in Pittsburgh, one in Baltimore, obviously, with the Steelers and Ravens both winning on their home fields. But this time around, where the first two games they might have been looked upon as a lot more close in terms of how competitive each team's going to be against each other. This time around, the Ravens enter as heavy favorites. Actually, the Ravens enter this game as the largest favored team in these playoffs, in this wild card round. They enter as 9.5 point favorites as of this morning, and that's the largest difference between any of the games that we have going on this weekend. And why that is because Pittsburgh have barely, you want to talk about limp into this stage of the competition. They're basically crawling to the wild card round, right? That's how bad it's been over their last four games. They've obviously lost all of them, and they've been outscored 109-57, and they're trying to win their first playoff game since 2016. A very long playoff drought, almost a decade since they won their last playoff game, and it's just so far below the standard, obviously, of the Steelers, and it's just a big blemish on Mike Tomlin, unfortunately, right? Because he is the head coach, he's the presumed leader of this team, and to have something like that, largely standing out over everything, it seems a bit unfair to some extent, but also, I mean, they haven't been able to get it done, so how unfair could it really be, right? You just gotta get it done in the wild card round, right? And they've just not been able to do it. They've had a lot of slow and bad endings to these regular seasons, and it just carries into the playoffs. So that's a lot on their doing, quite honestly. And this first game, talking about the Steelers and the Ravens, just overall from this year, the first game was very heavy on the defensive side of the ball. It was only 18-16 in favor of the Steelers, while the second game looked pretty lopsided just based on the final score. But really, the Steelers were in that game. They were only losing by a touchdown when Lamar Jackson threw that interception to Minkah Fitzpatrick, and the Steelers were in a position where they took the ball away, obviously, and that they could go and tie the game. But then Russell Wilson throws that pick six, and from that point on, the game is pretty much out of reach while they are down 14 points at that point after that pick six. And not to mention the fumble that Russell Wilson had at the 3-yard line as well, that kind of threw everything off for the Steelers. They lost the turnover battle, and you just can't do that when your margin of error is so small. And that stems from not as much talent on the offensive side of the ball as these other teams. So you really got to play perfect for you to even have a legitimate chance of winning. And for the majority of these games that they've lost, they haven't been able to do that as well. But, the last time, if we're going to be looking at the positives for the Steelers in this game, there was no George Pickens last time, and they were still, in that game like I mentioned. And really, overall, the Steelers hold a 3-1 record against Baltimore when they've played in the playoffs. So take that for what you will, but, we are talking about right now. So, it's looking pretty lopsided in that regard. And also, George Pickens isn't coming off of his best game per se, and it's getting kind of awkward over there in Pittsburgh. At least around the organization. Maybe within it, it's all regular. They don't really hear all the outside noise. But around the organization, I feel like there's a lot more of a high tension, not as much tolerance for George Pickens, especially after the antics and things like that, and especially last game where he dropped a lot of passes. It's not going great as of right now for the Steelers wide receiver, so he definitely needs to have a big game. But looking forward now to the injuries in this game, there's not too many big ones in terms of the Steelers. I mean, Chris Boswell and Cam Hayward were unable to practice yesterday because they were dealing with some they were dealing with some illnesses, some flu-like symptoms in Hayward's case. And for Chris Boswell, I'm pretty sure it was just a regular sickness. I didn't really read too much into it, or just wasn't labeled as anything specific. But those were really the biggest ones. Dante Jackson, he was a full participant all week, so it looks like he's going to be able to play. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the Steelers' current starting offensive lineman, Mason McCormick, broke his hand last week against the Bengals, but he could either play in this game, but just going to have to wear a big brace on his hand, or he is in danger of missing the game. So that's really the biggest injury for the Steelers as of right now. They're pretty fortunate to be heading into this game with everybody. You know, it hasn't been the case for a couple seasons now in the past, so that's something good for the Steelers. But really the biggest injury news comes from the side of the Baltimore Ravens, because today their head coach John Harbaugh announced that Zay Flowers will not be playing in this game. He is still dealing with that knee injury, and because the game is on Saturday, right, it's almost like today's Friday in a regular week, so he hasn't practiced up until this point, and really very limited to no practice time by this point in a regular week. You are trending towards not playing, and John Harbaugh made that news official this week. I don't think they've mentioned the specifics of the knee injury. It's just, it's pretty much day to day, week to week. I'm sure if they move on, he's going to play next week, but, he wasn't able to get it through for this upcoming first round of the playoffs. So the Ravens are going to be without their first-time Pro Bowl receiver in Zay Flowers, which is huge because, he logged over 1,000 yards and he had 74 receptions on the year. And like I said, he recorded his first Pro Bowl. That's the first time the Ravens have drafted a wide receiver that's made the Pro Bowl. So clearly they definitely hit on Zay Flowers, but he won't be able to play for them this upcoming weekend. And with that in mind now, we're going to move on to our goals that we have for each team, something that they need to make sure they do in order to get the victory on Saturday for the Baltimore Ravens. What I'd like to see them do that I think would be very beneficial for them would be in their secondary, in their coverages, in just how they line up and try to deceive the coverages for Russell Wilson. Try and trick him, try and show him something and then quickly rotate off of it or something like that. Try to make it as difficult as possible for Russell Wilson and the Steelers offense to kind of decide what they're doing. That you already know that they're pretty limited when it comes to playmaking on that side of the ball. It's pretty much just George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and probably Calvin Austin. That's about it. So try and switch up the looks, switch in a lot of zones, different zones, man coverage, make it look like man coverage, but it's actually zone. 2 high safeties versus 1 high. Everything you could possibly do, try to throw it at the Steelers' way. Because they are so limited, you kind of know where they're going with the football. And so far through these last 4 games, they haven't been very active in throwing near the middle of the field. So you can try to use that to your advantage as much as you can to kind of force them into some throws, take away the outside throws so they're kind of out of their comfort zone. And really, if you make them believe that they have a deep pass kind of option with the kind of coverage that they are seeing, and then it quickly changes halfway through the play, that'll also play in your favor, obviously, because then Russ has to tuck it. He kind of has to scramble to look for somebody else, and that Steelers offensive line hasn't been looking great for them to kind of just be back there, kind of just buying time. So I think that would be huge for the Ravens to kind of do that against the Steelers on Saturday. And then for the Steelers, the only thing I really need to just see them do, I'm begging, is to switch up the monotony, the kind of schedule, the rhythm of their play calling, because I can't be sitting at home watching the game knowing that they're going to run it every single time on first and second down. I can't know that when I'm at home, because if I know it, then the Baltimore Ravens obviously know it, and everybody else watching the game knows it, and it just makes it easy, right? I can't know that every first down you're going to run it an outside zone or a toss play, because then it's a lot easier for the Ravens. You're not really challenging them in that aspect, right? You have to try and keep them on their toes, and you get behind the chains more often than not, and then you're really out of your comfort zone. So for the love for everything, please, for the Steelers, just need to just switch that up. Throw it once in a while on first down. It's not gonna kill you as much as it is anyway that you're losing yards. So that's something that I think they need to do against the Ravens, right? Because you have nothing to lose, right? The Steelers might as well try everything because they're not favored. They're going on the road, so it's not going to hurt them anyway, right? Nobody thinks they're going to win at this point. So that is something I'd like to see for the Steelers to give them their best chance at least at winning this game. And then in terms of matchups, it kind of goes along the same way. George Pickens going up against the Ravens secondary against Marlon Humphrey, or Stevens on the other side. Stevens gets flagged a lot, and George Pickens didn't play their last time in Baltimore, where you look at a guy like Marlon Humphrey on the other side as well, and he's had 2 interceptions off of Russell Wilson. So that matchup now, where it's for all the marbles, having George Pickens there this time in Baltimore, it'll certainly change up the coverages, right? But definitely be aware of Marlon Humphrey, right, if you're Russell Wilson. And then the Ravens' outside pass rush going up against the Steelers' tackles, because Kyle Van Noy's been very good. He's been very effective for them. It always feels like he gets a sack each and every game. And on the opposite side for the Steelers, Dan Moore, their left tackle, has not been very good at all. He started the season off pretty well, but recently he's just been getting beat too easily, and it just hasn't given Russell Wilson the amount of time to throw the ball. And Russ isn't going to escape the pocket and run for like 20 yards, so he definitely needs that. So that's something the Ravens could definitely take advantage of on Dan Moore's side and Broderick Jones' side, but Broderick Jones has been playing better. Then the last one is just going to be the obvious one, right? The Ravens wide receivers going up against the Steelers defensive back. This is one of the only and most recent time that the Steelers secondary has been completely healthy. Dante Jackson is going to be playing this game along with Joey Porter Jr. And for the Ravens, they can't say the same thing because Zay Flowers isn't going to play on the opposite side. So does that mean the Steelers could maybe play a little bit more man coverage, a little bit more single high on these guys, on Rashad Bateman, on, I don't even know who their other receivers are, on like Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely or anything like that? Could they play more man coverage, and could that allow them to bring more people down into the box to try and stop Derrick Henry? That could be something if they feel confident in doing that, but again, you have to switch it up. You can't just run the same thing every time, but I think that's an avenue that they can explore, because Zay Flowers is a lot more dangerous in man coverage because he's a lot more shiftier, and it's hard to get your hands on him as well. So the fact that he's not playing, I think, would definitely benefit Pittsburgh to play a little bit more man coverage and try and stop Derrick Henry and really keep Lamar Jackson from doing Lamar Jackson sort of things. But all in all, when it comes to predicting, I have to go with Baltimore. Just one, so I don't look like a homer picking the Steelers, but also it's just you have an MVP on one side and also arguably an Offensive Player of the Year as well. And on the Steelers side, you just can't see how, if it's just offense for offense, blow for blow, how the Steelers could really keep up in this regard, especially how well the Ravens are playing and just how slow and disruptive the Steelers offense has been. So I don't love their chances. They don't have momentum on their side at all. And Mike Tomlin is 1-6 in playoff games when he's the underdog. So this is going to be one of his tallest tasks to kind of overcome. Is it capable of happening? Sure. But is it likely? And am I going to pick it? Probably not. So I'm going to go with the Ravens at home for them to win, because if they don't, it's going to be a huge, catastrophe if they don't beat this Steelers team, right? So we're going to go with the Ravens. I'm going to go with them to beat the Steelers. So those are the 2 previews that we're going to go through in today's show. Then tomorrow we're going to go through the other games on the weekend as well. But we're not going to move too far off the playoffs, because we're going to be looking at every team's most important player in this year's playoffs. We're going to only focus on the AFC in today's show, and then tomorrow we're going to get to the NFC, but we're going to go through each team a couple of the teams that I already mentioned and just pick their most important player, in my opinion. Which player is going to be huge for them to make sure they get a victory in not only the first round, but going forward. So I'm going to let you guys know my picks when we return in just a few seconds.
Looking